Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl Top 10 with Nick Meanahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey now folks, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and it is time, finally, for another one of my scintillating and, dare I say, sexy top 10 lists. This time we're doing top 10 one versus all games. Specifically speaking, which is a tough thing to say, specifically speaking, this is a list all about games where one player at the table is actively working against all of the other players. It's either going to be everyone else winning, or it's going to be that person winning, and that's it. Now, this was an interesting list for me for a couple of reasons. First off, some lists I play very fast and loose with the rules, and I don't really care. This is not to be taken seriously. But I had specific criteria I wanted to put in place for this list. For starters, obviously, tabletop role-playing games are right out. Those games are all one versus all, Dungeon Master or Game Master versus the other players. Technically, it's not supposed to be like that, but anyone who's played D&D knows that they've been in games where it's the Dungeon Master actively trying to kill the other players. But I didn't want to include RPGs on this list. I also didn't want to include traitor games where there may or may not be a traitor. For instance, Shadows over Camelot and Dead of Winter are top 10 games for me, like of all games. But I don't really think they meet the criteria of what I consider to be a one versus all game. In both of those games, there may be no traitor whatsoever. Also, in Shadows over Camelot, with the expansion, there could be 2 traitors, which also sort of disqualifies it. I also avoided games like The Resistance, where there's usually a team of traitors. It's more of a team versus team game, even if you can technically have only one spy on a game if you play with the minimum amount of players in The Resistance. So I know there's a lot of caveats, and I probably still flouted the rules a little bit with some of the entries on my list. But the other issue that I found interesting but also frustrating about this list was because I was really eager to do this for a long time, and I'm like, yeah, this is going to be a fun list. This is going to be an easy one for me to put together because I have a lot of choices. The hard part is just going to be whittling it down. It turned out to be the opposite. There are really not a lot of games that, well, really there's not a lot of one versus all games as far as my definition goes out there to begin with. And then for me, I haven't played a lot of them. I've only played a certain amount of them, so there were not a lot of options for me for this list. I probably had 13 games that qualified, and I only had to whittle it down pretty easily to 10. And again, it's just because there wasn't enough of a section to pull from. If you're talking about like worker placement games, I could easily pull out like 20 to 25 games of that I could theoretically vote for. Not so much for this particular list. But still, it's a genre that I like, a very niche genre, and there's some really stellar games that are found within it. So without further ado, let me go ahead and give you my top 10 one versus all games. My number 10 is the only party game on this list, and it's the only game that I found to be somewhat questionable including on the list. And that's why, even though it's actually more fun than a lot of the other games on this list, I'm still relegating it to number 10. And that is Spyfall. This is also one of the newest games on the list. Spyfall is a party game where players are either working together to root out the spy, or you are the spy. And that's going to change, maybe, from game to game. Unfortunately, there are some situations where someone's a spy over and over again. Sorry for that person. But everyone's going to be at a certain location. There's a bunch of little location decks in the game. But one player gets a spy card instead and has no idea where they are, and that spy has to try to suss out where they are while the other players try to suss out that character. The reason why I think that even though it's a party game and it's pretty light and games are like 5 minutes, why this still is applicable for this list, even amongst these bigger, heavier games that I'm going to go over, is because when you're the spy, it really feels like you are an island unto yourself and it's everybody against you. There is pressure, there is tension. It's like, you are not on my team and I gotta make you think that I am, that we are on the same team. And it can be pretty stressful at times to the point where some people don't like the game because of that. But I love that aspect of like, I know something the rest of you do not know. All I gotta do is fake it long enough for you to make you guys think that someone else is who I actually am. That's a very complicated jumble of words, but the point is, I love Spyfall. I think it's definitely a one versus all game because it has that feel to it, and that is why it's my number 10. My number 9 is Guardians Chronicles. Now, this is a game, if you go back and watch my review of it, I was pretty harsh about it in some regards. I thought that the rulebook was terrible, and I thought that there was just some things that definitely need to be clarified and streamlined in the game. I have since come to appreciate it more and more, especially since the rules have been updated, and there's been Wave 2 stuff from the Kickstarter of different factions and characters and enemies to fight against. This, to me, may end up being one of the best superhero games ever. It's one player taking control of the evil Dr. Skarov and all of his band of minions and henchmen and robots and other different supervillains working together against this team of, or working by himself against this team of superheroes, and there's tons of different options for that as well with the expansions. Every hero on the team feels different and distinct and has different special abilities. But Dr. Skarov has tons of resources at his disposal, and henchmen and minions and different traps to set off, and there's different objectives and scenarios. And all of this comes together into a really, really cool package, warts and all. It's still not a perfect game, but definitely for a one versus all experience, it's distinctly unique. So it's probably repetitive, but nevertheless, distinctly unique from any of the other games on this list, especially with regards to theme. So if you've been hesitant to try it, at least give it a shot with the updated rules, because I think it's solid. Guardians Chronicles, my number 9. Now, I said that my number 9, Guardians Chronicles, was unique as far as its theme, and my number 8, Tragedy Looper, is even more distinct as far as its gameplay. It's a difficult game to even describe. One player is a mastermind. The other players are investigators or civilians who are thrust into the role of investigators, and the mastermind is trying to have a tragedy, hence the title, happen every day. It might be a murder, it might be a suicide, it might be a serial killer going around killing multiple people, it could be all of these different things. The other players have the ability to time travel, so they're trying to figure out where this tragedy is going to happen, who it's going to happen to with all these different character cards at these different locations, and figure out a way to stop it. And if they fail, they loop back in time and get to do it all over again. But and use the information they had from before to figure out what's going to happen this time. But the mastermind also knows that they're time traveling and can adjust things as well. And the game is very unique. There's different scenarios, and scripts that the mastermind works off of, different ways to set it up. You can make your own scripts. It's all simultaneous action selection, and there's just so many unique things going on with this game. And again, it feels like not just that the mastermind is, working against the other players to win, which you definitely are, but it also feels like you are telling a story, which is, again, a very distinct thing amongst all the games on this list. So it's a bear to get through the rules, and it is not an easy game to wrap your head around or to play all the time, but it is definitely an interesting experience. That is Tragedy Looper, my number 8. My number 7, by pure coincidence, has the number 7 in the title. It's funny how these types of things work out. It is Level 7 Omega Protocol from Privateer Press. Now, this is one of a few dungeon crawling games that are going to end up on this list, but this one has a very unique theme as opposed to those. This is basically Aliens 2, like Aliens, the second movie, the board game, but set in the Level 7 universe of Privateer Press. You are an elite group of operatives going down into this complex to root out the alien scum. One player is the overseer who controls all these alien forces. Think of him as the alien queen. He probably wouldn't like it if you called him that, though. But you have these different powers and abilities you can use depending on the scenario. There's a really interesting mechanism where the Marine players, the Team Bravo or whatever they are, as they use their abilities, they supply the Overseer with adrenaline, which, it's a weird thing, but the Overseer collects that adrenaline and uses it to heighten his powers and the powers of his alien forces, which, mechanically speaking, is letting you do more actions and do more stuff and powers with your really cool dashboard area. And the other players, it's really, really cooperative because you have got to help each other out. There is no hot dogging in this game. If the allied forces of the Marines falter at all and trying to run off on their own and do things, they are going to die miserably. The Overseer is going to take advantage of all of that stuff. So I love that back and forth. I love how not being too careful with your Marines is going to give the Overseer a huge edge. And I love the theme of going down through these tunnels and there's aliens popping out of the vents. Really, really neat experience. Sadly, it doesn't look like there will ever be expansions for this game, and that is just too bad. But even as it is totally worth it for that base game. Level 7 Omega Protocol, my number 7, by coincidence. My number 6 is very interesting because I think it's a very polarizing game. It's Mansions of Madness, which is one of the Cthulhu-verse games from Fantasy Flight. This one is a one versus all game. One player is the, I always forget the name of it. It's the Keeper, I think? Keeper, Overlord, Overseer, whatever. It's just one player, probably the Keeper, who is trying to manipulate the forces of this area, which is usually like a mansion or a house or some outdoor areas, depending on what expansions you have, all trying to stick within the confines of a story. You're telling a story that you select ahead of time, but you have different options that the players and you decide upon, either randomly or deterministically at the beginning, detailing the criteria of the story. So it all may be about the investigators, the other players working together, getting to the bottom of a murder, but the details of that murder and who was killed and how they were killed and what happens afterwards may be very different. And it also dictates the different cards that you use in the game and where things happen within the house. At the same time, it's got the typical kind of Arkham Horror, Eldritch Horror type of things where monsters pop out, and although this time they're in a really cool miniature form, they're not just tokens, and you have to deal with them in different places of the house. You're investigating, you have allies, you find items. The Keeper has different special abilities and darkness tokens and things that he uses to activate the abilities on all of his minions, and special like cards that he can play on the investigators that cause them to go insane and just warp their reality and make things much more difficult for them. So it can be a very vicious game, actually. And I mentioned that it was polarizing, and that's because some people just hate this game. I've seen this when I've talked about it in the past. People are like, you love that game? It's terrible. Where other people were like, yeah, I'm so glad this game is getting attention. It's fantastic. I think a lot of this has to do with Fantasy Flight screwing up some things with at least one of the expansions. Was like totally mishandled and had like improper components and rules, and they had to replace a lot of stuff. And I think that it, just by its very nature, it's not as accessible as some of the other Cthulhu games, and therefore is more polarizing. But I still enjoy it. I still think it's a very long game, but it's an incredible experience of a game. That is Mansions of Madness, my number 6. My number 5 is Star Wars Imperial Assault, also a fairly new game to the list. And I'll be honest, there's another game that's very similar to this game that is higher up on my list, and the only reason for that is just because I don't like the theme of Star Wars as much. Star Wars is fine, don't get me wrong. I'm not a Star Wars hater by any means. I'm just not an uber fan for it. There's other themes that I prefer. But I do think that this is a solid game. It definitely steeps you in that Star Wars lore. One player takes control of all of the dark side forces. The other players work cooperatively as rebel forces, going through different story-driven scenarios that sort of take place on the fringes of the main Star Wars storyline, which is just an inevitability in games like this. But you still get to do all the things you'd want to do. Play as Jedi, play as Wookiees. I mean, there's tons of different characters that you can play as. There's all kinds of expansions that you can get and play with. There's more on the horizon. Of course, this has been a huge seller for Fantasy Flight. But there's a lot of interesting parts of the game. It's beautiful. There's fantastic miniatures. There's the whole, is it the threat dial or threat gauge? I forget the name of it right this second. That is an interesting thing. It almost works just like the Overseer thing in Level 7 Omega Protocol, where the actions that you, the allied characters, take can really influence what the one is able to do, and it works really well in this game. So it's a fantastic presentation and a solid game, campaign-driven game. That is Star Wars Imperial Assault, my number 5. My number 4 is another new game on the list, and it is just that good that it flew up to near the top of the list, at least. That is Specter Ops from Plaid Hat Games and Nazca Games. This is one of the hidden movement one versus all games. In this game, the theme is science fiction. There's zombies involved somehow, blah, blah, blah. One player is an agent of this organization called ARC, and you are trying to infiltrate this organization called Raxon. It's like an evil world mega corporation. With a bunch of hunters who are trying to hunt you down. So as the agent, you actually have a pad of paper that you're writing on secretly, showing where you are moving because your figure's not actually out on the board, while the other players are hunters who are on the board and are spreading out to different areas, trying to enclose you in a net and catch you, a metaphorical net. You have different types of special abilities and gear that you can use as the agents. All the hunters have different special abilities like psychic powers or being able to sniff you out in the case of the gene spliced werewolf type character. There's just a lot of really neat thematic elements to the game, while at the same time it's very simple. I mean, it's not like an overly complex game. It gets right down to it, and it keeps the games flowing briskly. As the one, as the agent, you definitely feel this sense of tension, just like how I described with Spyfall, where you know that everyone else is against you and you can see what's going on out there. You see them starting to close their stranglehold on you, and there's not much you can do other than try to wriggle your way out and be as clever as possible. So Specter Ops, fantastic experience. Easily my number 4. My number 3 is Super Dungeon Explorer. And you know, if I had done this list a couple of months ago, it probably wouldn't be ranked this high. But in those couple of months, I've gotten a chance to play and enjoy the expansion base set, Super Dungeon Explorer: The Forgotten King. And that has completely streamlined the one versus all rules, which in the original were very clunky. There was a lot of extra stuff that didn't need to be there. Games would take hours and hours to play. But with the streamlined rules, things move much faster. There's a lot of different cool abilities that the console, which is a play on words, console, that's the joke. Anyways, as the console, you have a lot of different special abilities, but they're not as finicky. They're easy to keep track of, and you can get right down to the business of summoning monsters and smashing in the heroes. Whereas the heroes can just hit monsters and get loot. They don't have to worry about this track, and they know when the mini bosses are going to come out when they destroy the spawn points, so they can get right down to it. And if you're not familiar with Super Dungeon Explorer, it's basically the game Gauntlet, the old arcade game, but with chibi anime characters, and it works really, really well. And it just so happens that Forgotten King also has amazing miniatures that you don't have to assemble. So that's another point in its favor. So my number 3 is Super Dungeon Explorer, but more specifically, Super Dungeon Explorer: The Forgotten King. A fantastic one versus all game. Don't worry about the co-op mode. I feel very badly about saying what my number 2 is, because you are not going to be able to get it without spending an exorbitant amount of money. But I have to mention it. That is The Fury of Dracula, the most recent edition, specifically from Fantasy Flight Games. I never played the original Games Workshop edition, but I've heard that it has its charm, and some people seem to prefer that version more. But no matter how you play it, it is a wonderful, rich, thematic experience. One player is Dracula, and you're moving around the old world European country. And the way that you do that is one of the best parts about the game. You have these map cards that you play, and you lay down a track of cards so that the hunters, who are all the famous people from the books, you have Jonathan Harker, I might butcher their names, Jonathan Harker, you have Mina, you have Van Helsing. They are all working together to find you and kill you, and they can follow your trail, because the last card that you place, the furthest, one of the most latest places that you've been to, I know that's hard to describe, they get to see where that is, and then they can kind of track you down from the cards that you've put down. But as Dracula, you can also set traps for them. These traps can be thugs, they could be vampire bats, they could be young vampires that you create. And that's another way that Dracula can actually win the game. Dracula can either win by just running out the clock and escaping before time is up for the hunters, or he can actually bring a bunch of new vampires to life, or unlife as it were. See what I did there? And if that happens, then no matter what happens to Dracula, it's too late for Europe. Their vampires are swarming everywhere. But I love this game. It is so deep and enriching and thematic. There's lots of things going on. It is a very long game. It can be a bit complicated, but man, is it a cool experience. Whether you're playing as Dracula or whether you're playing as the hunters with their special abilities and their equipment, and once you finally find Dracula, you can have a knockdown, beat out, something or other fight with them. It's just a cool experience, and man, I'm really sorry if you can't get it or if you haven't played it. I don't know why they haven't reprinted it yet, and I really, really hope that they do someday. Everyone deserves a shot at playing this game, because it's fantastic. That is The Fury of Dracula, my number 2 one versus all game. For my number 1, I went back and forth quite a bit with this. I think The Fury of Dracula easily could have been my number 1 here, or maybe even Super Dungeon Explorer, given the amount of time I put into it and the hours and hours that I've played it. But I had to go with theme that I like, replayability, variability, and just bringing back old memories of the fond memories, at least, of when I used to play Dungeons and Dragons. And for all of those different things, nothing beats Descent. Specifically, Descent Journeys in the Dark 2nd edition from Fantasy Flight. This is an RPG in a box. And when I say that, some people might get a misconception. It's not like you're playing a real RPG experience. You're not doing a spreadsheet of your character, and it's not deeply a storytelling game. You're not like role-playing all the time, although I guess you could. And that might give people a lot of, bad expectations if that's what you come to the game expecting. But rather, this is a game that gives you some of that RPG experience of tactical combat, of bits of storyline, of leveling up your character, of getting new equipment and gear, but it does it in a very manageable dose. I've never played a game of Descent that's been longer than a couple of hours. Maybe our first game was a few hours. I don't really think it was that bad. But the game, that's how the game is, and you can play as many scenarios as you want per night. There's a really interesting aspect where whoever is the overlord for Descent, they actually get to level up over time as well. They gain experience. They gain better cards, which is a fascinating concept. And like I said at the beginning of this video, let's be real here. When you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, even if you're the DM, there's a part of you that wants to like rough up and kill maybe the characters sometimes. It's a natural inclination where you start to feel at odds with the other players. Descent just owns up to that idea completely. It is totally a one versus all game. Yes, as the Overlord, you want the heroes to not be totally shellacked in every game, and you want to keep if you're doing a campaign mode, which you should, that's the way the game is meant to be played, you want them to keep progressing and going forward, but hey, if you want to make the game interesting, you need to go at them full bore with traps, with monsters, keep them from meeting whatever their conditions are. And when I said variability, there's so much to this game. Even just in the base box, you have a ton of scenarios and storylines, characters to choose from, special powers, equipment cards, tons of monsters, and then they have I can't even keep up with how much stuff is out there for this game right now. So when you take all that into account, it's a wonderful game. I've grown to love it more and more and more over time, and it wouldn't work nearly as well as a full cooperative game. You can buy an expansion pack for that, but that's not the way the game is meant to be. It was built from the ground up to be a one versus all game, and it works wonderfully for that. That is Descent 2nd Edition, Journeys in the Dark, whatever you want to call it, from Fantasy Flight, my number one versus all game. Well, that's it, folks, and I really want a lot of the top 10s that I do to be yearly endeavors. Like, I plan on doing my top 10 deck building and co-op games list again at some point, hopefully in the very near future. But that's because so many games come out within those broad genres that it's kind of easy to do, and I am always having a constantly shifting tastes within those genres. I don't know that I can do the one versus all list every year because most of it's not going to change because there's just not that many games coming out that are high quality within this niche genre. But I hope that I'm wrong. And I hope that a lot more games like this come out because I really, really enjoy it. I think it's a fascinating concept that can be done in a lot of different ways. Hidden movement like Specter Ops and Fury of Dracula, or just straight up like dungeon crawling, dungeon master type games like Mansions of Madness and Descent. There's a lot of different options that you have here, or even just hidden roles like Spyfall. Very simple, easy party games. So there's a lot of room to grow in this genre, and I hope more and more publishers and designers latch onto it. As usual, my name is Nick. This is Board Game Brawl. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.